Okay, so we are going to continue the Dark Souls tier list series with Dark Souls 3, as I have not currently played Dark Souls 2 yet. Um, and let's just get started. So, starting off with Udex Gundyr, which I believe is a B tier boss. And all the intro bosses that I've played, Udex Gundyr is absolutely the most solid, and even when I do a new character on Dark Souls 3, it is still by far the most fun I've had with an intro boss. I just think that mechanically it's super solid, and it's definitely good entry point for new people to get into the series, as it is both challenging and fair. All right, so moving on, we have Vort of the Boreal Valley. I think Vort is a C tier fight, but Vort is absolutely an S tier in terms of soundtrack. Uh, Vort is kind of a relatively forgettable fight. He's not one of the individuals that I think of when I think of Dark Souls 3, but that whatever the music is playing there is iconic of the Souls series, and definitely one of the best soundtracks there. All right, Curse Rotted Greatwood. That I believe is probably an E tier fight. It's not as bad as something like Bed of Chaos or Dragon God, but not a great fight. You're just popping the pimples all over this guy, and overall not a not a great fight. Although you do get an item that unlocks a NPC at the Firelink Shrine and gives a lot of cool items. So I mean there is that. But if we're just judging Curse Rotted Greatwood by himself, yeah, not a great fight at all. All right, Crystal Sage. I think it's a D tier. It's another kind of forgettable fight. It's just you really gotta I don't know. It's just not a great fight overall. And really what I think about it, it's a super easy fight at the end of the day. And then the sage splits into a bunch, and he just has one hit point each. It kind of feels like a remake of the Fool's Idol boss from Demon Souls. But overall, not a great fight, not a super memorable fight, and yeah. Okay, Deacons of the Deep. Now, I'll be the first to admit, Deacons of the Deep is objectively one of the worst bosses in this game, but my most recent playthrough that I did of Dark Souls 3 was on New Game Plus 2, and I was running with the Ring Knight paired greatswords, and I gotta say, it was a whole lot of fucking fun mowing through these retirement home guys, and super easy boss, by the way. I mean, real fun boss if you have the right weapon, and that's that's the only reason they're going in C tier. But yeah, I mean, it's just really fun to mow them down, is what I gotta say about that. All right, moving on. So Abyss Watchers. Abyss Watchers is an absolutely fantastic boss. Um, I played Bloodborne before I did Demon Souls, and I feel like I misplaced one there, but there we go. I played Bloodborne before I played Demon Souls, and I gotta say, Abyss Watchers reminds me a lot of one of my favorite bosses in the entire series, Lady Maria, with the kind of flame arts that they have in the second phase. But regardless of that, I think Abyss Watch is just an absolutely mechanically solid boss. I think it's a very fun boss, and it's one I would look forward to fighting every time I do a Dark Souls 3 playthrough. And moving on, we have High Lord Wolnir. I think that goes down there with Crystal Sage. I don't think it's as bad. Well, I don't know. I do think it is actually as bad as Cursed Rotted Greatwood. It's a gimmick fight. It's kind of similar in the Cursed Rotted Greatwood in terms of you just need to fight the weak points on the boss to beat it. And in High Lord Wolnir's case, you gotta kill the rings that he has on his arms. But visually, I think he is a little bit more appealing than whatever monstrosity that the Cursed Rotted Greatwood is. Yeah, I wouldn't say it's a forgettable fight, but pretty meh fight overall. So, all right, moving on. Old Demon King. That would go into D tier. Old Demon King kind of reminds me of the Asylum Demon and in Dark Souls 1 and the copies of Asylum Demon. But kind of forgettable boss. The first time I ever fought the Old Demon King, I actually beat it damageless. So kind of a forgettable fight, kind of just in a real I wouldn't necessarily say the Smoldering Lake is forgettable, but definitely missable is what I would say. Overall, not an overly memorable fight. Not by no means it's a horrible fight, but it's there. I would say it's probably better than Crystal Sage, but probably not by much. Anyway, moving on. So Pontiff Sulyvahn. I absolutely love Pontiff Sulyvahn. One of the best fights in this game. And this game is pretty competitive, and there's a reason I'm only putting Pontiff in A tier. I think he is absolutely deserving of S tier if we go way back on S tier, but the only reason I'm putting him at high A tier is if you've played Dark Souls 3, there's some absolutely fantastic fights in this game, and Pontiff is on his own, he is a absolutely fantastic fight, but he is not up to the level of some of the DLC fights that we have here. All right, moving on. So Yorm the Giant. Yorm, I would really put in the C tier, kind of a mid C tier. I'd put him above Deacons of the Deep, but I have a real weird liking of Deacons of the Deep. Yorm is a gimmick fight. You get the and also partially fan service because you get the Storm Ruler from the first game. And now I will admit that it is fun as hell just blasting this guy with the Storm Ruler. And you also get to summon Sigurd with the who also has a Storm Ruler, and it's just double teaming this guy with the Storm Ruler. And I think it's a really fun fight overall, and I think it's actually a pretty well done gimmick fight. But overall, in the scope of Dark Souls 3, I think it's an okay fight. It is a memorable fight, but because he is one of the Lords of Cinder. But yeah, I mean, good fight, but not a fantastic fight, is what I would say. Okay, so moving on, Aldris, Devourer of Gods. Oh boy, this guy, is a little tricky for me to place. I'm really feeling C tier between Yorm and Deacons of the Deep. Or really, if you're a realistic person and looking at these things objectively, after Yorm and Deacons of the Deep is probably in fucking F tier. But Aldrich, I kind of view as a very RNG fight. If you get that arrow ability and don't know how to dodge it correctly, you will most likely just die. But if you run into the kind of apex of the room, that little very small cupboard there, you can definitely dodge the arrow ability. But other than that, boss moves around a lot, and definitely it's a range fight. I mean, you're going into this and it is an absolute range fight. So if you're not playing a range character, you might have a little bit of trouble with it. And if you're playing a range character, probably not as much. But that arrow ability is a fucking bitch. I gotta tell you. All right, so moving on. Dancer of the Boreal Valley. I love this fight. I'd place it in an A tier after Abyss Watchers, but this is one of the very few fights that I have I don't know what it is, but I have never had any trouble beating Dancer of the Boreal Valley. Something about this boss just apparently clicks with me, and yeah. Anyway, so about the boss, it has a super solid move set, and is it's one of the bosses in this game, one of the many bosses in this game that I very much so look forward to in fighting. All right, moving on. So Dragon Slayer Armor. Dragon Slayer Armor is another B tier fight, and I would actually place him above Udex Gundyr. Just a very mechanically solid fight. I don't think there's anything unfair about this fight. And another one of those bosses that I very much so look forward to fighting in this game. All right, so moving on. Osiris, the Consumed King. I would place Osiris at the middle of C tier. I think he's better than Yorm, but worse than Vort. And the main reason of that is Osiris is very unpredictable, and I've heard from some that it's kind of an RNG fight. I've never really had that issue, but the main issue I have with this boss is he is so damn vocal. He is talking throughout the entire damn fight, and it's a little annoying on your 4th or 5th playthrough. So, and even as a boss objectively, I don't think he's a super mechanically solid. So, yeah. All right. So moving on, Champion Gundyr. It's an absolute A tier fight. I remember the first time I went into this fight, and I kind of realized that it's kind of almost a mirror of the Udex Gundyr fight from the intro, but this guy started kicking my ass real hard, and I kind of eventually realized, like, okay, got to tone down the pace with this guy and actually learn his moves. But very fantastic and memorable move set, and another one of the bosses that I very much so look forward to fighting when I play this game. All right, so moving on to Twin Princes. Twin Princes, I would put it kind of at I would put him at a B tier. I love the concept of this fight. there's a very big thing about this fight that I do not like, and I do not like the the boss is teleporting in it. I think in this game it can be a little difficult once the boss teleports to find them again and realize what attack that they are doing in that very short amount of time. Um, I think the boss's move set is fantastic, but it might be a limitations of the game that might prevent this boss from being an A tier boss. I just I just don't like the teleporting. That's it. Um, all right, moving on to Ancient Wyvern. Ancient Wyvern is between an E and an F. It's a super. I gotta put it in F. It's not a great fight by any means. And by any means, I mean all means. It's a fucking horrible fight. It's a super big gimmick fight. You just gotta run a fucking mile to get up to the top of the ramparts and then do a plunge attack on the dragon and it's dead. I think that singular part of it is okay, and if it was just that, I would probably put it in like a D tier. But that run to get to that point is fucking awful. Um yeah, it's if you've done the run there, it's just fucking bad. And I think this boss is absolutely one of the only bosses in this that is deserving of an F tier fight. Probably only the only one looking at the ones we have left, so. Okay, moving on to Nameless King. Oh, Nameless King is an S tier fight. I love the Nameless King. So the first playthrough I ever had, I never really struggled with it as much as some other players, but to each their own, the play style, and some bosses that might be difficult for me might be fucking cheese to the others. But Nameless King kind of goes back and forth between being extremely difficult and not very difficult at all. It really depends on if I lock onto the dragon in the first phase or not. If I don't, it's a cheese fight. But the Nameless King, or cheese fight in the first phase, I gotta say, Nameless King himself is one, a very lore significant character, and two, just an absolutely mechanically fantastic fight. It's just, I cannot speak highly enough of this guy. And when and if I ever do make a top 10 favorite Souls bosses video, this guy will definitely make it on the 10. So, all right, moving on to Soul of Cinder. That's another S tier fight, in my opinion. What I really love about this fight is each time you fight him, it's different, except for the second phase. But I mean, he'll switch between a short sword build, basically a two-handed build, a range or a magic build, a lance or spear build, and very unique and diverse move set in this first phase. And his second phase is absolutely pure fan service. But who didn't hear get hype when Gwen's theme started playing? Yeah, Soul of Cinder is actually in my background on my phone, so I love this guy. Always look forward to finding him, and I think he's a absolutely fantastic boss of the base game of Dark Souls. Okay, so moving on to Champion's Gravetender. I'd put it above Crystal Sage. Of the DLC, this is probably the most forgettable fight in here. and not a very challenging fight overall. More of an annoyance because this was actually the last boss I had to face in Dark Souls 3 when I was going through my entire beating the all the bosses here. Very, very forgettable fight. It's part of the DLC, but it doesn't necessarily feel like it should be. So kind of a gank boss overall, but not a great fight. All right, and speaking of that, moving into an actual great fight, we have Sister Fried, which I would very difficult to me play Sister Fried, and I think overall I would put it behind Nameless King purely because of the second phase. And now there is the argument out there that Sister Fried might be a little bit too fast for Dark Souls 3's mechanics. And partially I agree with that, but I think the actual scope of this fight and the cinematic and what this fight just really feels like, it's fucking badass. I mean, I was never one to really have a huge difficulty with Sister Fried, but one of the most fun fights and one of the most cinematic fights that I've fought in the entirety of Soul series. That third phase when she does that huge black flame jump attack is amazes me every single time, and I love Sister Fried. Definitely, absolutely one of the bosses I look forward to fighting when I play Dark Souls 3. Alright, so moving on here to the Demon Prince. This is the first boss of the Ring City DLC. Demon Prince is absolutely an A-tier fight, but I would put them just above the Dancer. Very unique fight, because you fight those two enemies at the beginning, and depending on which one you kill first, impacts the actual boss. Yeah, just overall very, very solid fight, very challenging fight, and another one of the ones I very much so look forward to in fighting. And moving on, so we have the actual opposite of that, Half-Light. I don't like Half-Light at all. I put it probably above Wolnir. I've only ever fought Half-Light offline due to hackers or potential hackers, I'll say. It's just, I mean, it's very reminiscent of the old Monk and Demon Souls, but just not a good boss in general. I think the actual Half-Light has a pretty good move set, but the fact that they can summon a NPC that heals them and the whole intro phase with that big dude, not great in my opinion. And oh boy, moving on to my actual favorite fight in all of Souls, Dark Eater Midir. Oh man, I cannot speak highly enough of Midir. It's not only the best dragon boss in the series, I think it is the best boss in the series. It's such a mechanically solid move set, such a challenging move set. First time I beat Midir took me 50 plus tries. And I will still hold this, Elden Ring included. It is the hardest boss in the entirety of Souls, including Malenia. Oh man. I could rant on and on about how much I love Midir, but got a video to do. So, yeah, Midir is my absolute favorite boss in the entire franchise of Souls. And moving on from that, we have Slave Knight Gale, who is actually my second favorite boss in the entirety of Souls. Now, really, you could probably ask me on a different day, and I'd say Gale's my favorite. But I think that I've kind of decided that Midir, I do like Midir over Gale. There's Gale is probably the most anime fight that you have in the entirety of Souls. Um, and I think it goes without saying that Midir and Gale, I will literally start a playthrough of Dark Souls 3 to fight those two bosses. So Midir and Gale, absolutely some of the, well, not some of the best bosses that the entire Soulsborne franchise has to offer. Now, keep in mind, I still have not beaten Dark Souls 2 or Sekiro. But man, Midir and Gale are going to be pretty hard tops. That's what I got to say about that. Yeah, I mean, that's my Dark Souls 3 tier list. So, if you're still watching at this point, the next one I will be doing is Elden Ring. While I have beaten Bloodborne and most of the bosses in it, keyword most, there's still a couple of bosses I got to go back and beat. And I will do the Bloodborne video after I do the Elden Ring video. So, that being said, take care and have a good night, morning, wherever you are. And that's it. Later.